Joe Burrow is injured again. This time he has turf toe on one of his toes, and that'll require surgery that'll have him be out for at least 3 months. Which means that he'll be able to play again somewhere around mid-December, and depending on how Jake Browning plays and the Bengals season looks like, he may be out for the entire season depending on how good the Bengals end up being. And this is so disappointing because through the first 5 seasons of Joe Burrow's career as a starter, the Cincinnati Bengals were 1-9 during the first 2 weeks of the season. 1-9. I think they only won one game in 2021. That season when they ended up going to the Super Bowl, they won, I think, week 1. But other than that, the first 2 weeks, they're always bad. They always get off to really slow starts where you think, what's going on? What's wrong with this team? But this is the first season that they were 2-0, 1-0 after week 1, after barely beating the Browns 17-16, and ended up miraculously beating the Jaguars after Joe Burrow went out early in the game. Jake Browning came in. Trevor Lawrence played really poorly. I have a whole bunch of stuff to say about Trevor Lawrence, but Jake Browning threw 3 interceptions and Joe Burrow was out and they still won the game, which is miraculous. And as a Bengals fan, you got to be happy about yourself with that. But Joe Burrow's injury says a whole lot about quarterbacks as a whole. Look, rules of football nowadays have been created and constructed to help and protect quarterbacks and stop them from being hurt all the time because they understand the quarterbacks are far too important. If we lose our quarterback, it could tank our season. Every other player could be a next man up mentality to maybe they come in and it's just like we never lost anybody. But for the quarterback specifically, we've seen far more instances of a team season being tanked with losing a quarterback as opposed to another position, a skill position player or a player on the line. We do see rare exceptions, of course. We see Brock Purdy come in, being the 3rd string quarterback in 2022 and guiding the 49ers all the way to the NFC Championship game. If Brock Purdy doesn't hurt his elbow in 2022, who knows what happens in that Eagles game, even though I think the Eagles would still win in that NFC Championship game. And obviously the Eagles, we saw Carson Wentz go out, who was playing at an MVP level. Nick Foles come in and they still win the Super Bowl. Maybe that says more about the fact that the Eagles in 2017 were flat out loaded on both sides of the ball and less about how great Carson Wentz was because we've seen the trajectory that he's on now. But regardless, losing a quarterback is really bad for teams, and that's why they protect them so much. But we still see quarterbacks hurt left and right. J.J. McCarthy isn't going to play in week 3. Brock Purdy didn't play in week 2, and he's probably not going to play in week 3. Mac Jones came in for him. Jaden Daniels, my quarterback, is having huge injury concerns, and he might not be able to play week 3 as well against the Raiders. You know, quarterbacks are football players too, and they get hurt. And I think part of the reason why they're getting hurt so much is because they don't take any hits in practice, any shots. So when they get a hit, when they get a sack, when they're trying to rush or pass and they get hit, they're not used to it. And it's bizarre. So maybe they're even more likely to get injured than some other skill position players. And it's frustrating. Even the game last night, Baker Mayfield was running all over the place, being competitive as hell, which is what you love about Baker. But he put himself into some dangerous situations. And look, by the end of the game, even though he led a great game-winning drive, that he was hurt and he was hobbled. And this is what you're going to deal with quarterbacks these days because they don't take any hits in practice because you want to preserve them. I get it. But is that the right strategy? Maybe not. But for Joe Burrow specifically, this could very well mean that Joe Burrow turns into Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck, a generational talent who I think was graded only behind John Elway and Peyton Manning as the highest graded quarterback that Mel Kiper has ever graded coming out of college. I think 4th on that list being Trevor Lawrence. Joe Burrow was a Heisman Trophy winner. He had maybe the single best season ever by a quarterback in college football on that 2019 LSU team. 60 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, came out with all this praise and all this promise. But if what I think could very well happen does happen, and the Cincinnati Bengals start losing and their season starts to tank, this could be, out of 6 seasons, the 3rd season in which Joe Burrow has a season-ending injury. His first season, we remember he tore something in his leg. I don't know if it was ACL or MCL or something like that. Something in his leg. His second and third season he played, 2021 and 2022. 2021, they made it to the Super Bowl. 2022, they made it to the NFC Championship game. 2023, he gets hurt again. He dislocates his wrist, and he's out for the entire year. 2024, he played great. He was on MVP caliber pace if the Bengals were winning more, but obviously they weren't winning more, so he was really never in the discussion to win MVP. But it wasn't about him because Burrow was great, Chase was great. It was more about the fact that the Bengals had absolutely no defense, and they still don't to this day outside of Trey Hendrickson. So it's surprising that they were able to win their first two games, which is a lot more about poor quarterback play on the other end than it is about the Cincinnati Bengals. So it shows that when Joe Burrow's on the field, great things happen. When he is healthy, great things happen. But the harsh truth is I think Joe Burrow is just an injury-prone quarterback. And does it say stuff solely about him, or is it a lot about the state of the offensive line of the Cincinnati Bengals? Because let's not forget, in 2021, the Bengals were lucky. Joe Burrow got sacked 9 times against the Tennessee Titans in 2021, which were the number 1 team in the AFC, and they still somehow won that game. He got sacked, I think it was 25 or 27 times during that 4-game playoff run. The offensive line was playing horrible, and they were still winning games, and they were this close away to winning the Super Bowl. I think they had a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl. So for you to have a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl on your way to win it, if a couple things don't go a certain way and Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp don't lead a brilliant game-winning drive, you could be Super Bowl champions with one of the worst offensive line performances that we've seen in the playoffs by a team. So it shows you how special Joe Burrow is. But no matter what, front office, general manager, you have to put things in place to protect your quarterback. If you don't, we saw what happened with the generational talent. His career will get cut short. And I pray it doesn't happen because Joe Burrow is very special, but it's not impossible that his career gets cut short because of his offensive line, and they may turn him into Andrew Luck. And that's the worry for the Bengals. I don't believe that Joe Burrow's career is cooked. He's still phenomenal talent on the field that has absolutely nothing to do with his on-the-field performance. But his injuries could catch up to him so much that it makes his on-the-field performance worse. And ultimately, maybe it'll shorten his career. And that's the worry that we have with Joe Burrow, that it will shorten his career. Because I love watching him play. The connection that he has with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Let's not forget, they paid both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. We knew they were going to play Chase, but they paid Higgins as well because Joe Burrow wanted them to be there, and he should want them to be there. They're both great receivers. Chase was an obvious one, but T. Higgins as well, which was a number 2 receiver. They gave a number 2 receiver $29 million a year. You don't do that in the NFL. Pay a number 2 $29 million. There's some number 1s who aren't even making $29 million. So to pay a number 2 that much, it's because you believe you have a special quarterback, and maybe we can offense our way enough to the playoffs, to deep playoff runs, and eventually to the Super Bowl. That's what you're hoping for. And sadly for the Bengals, it simply doesn't matter if you don't have somebody to protect your quarterback first so he can get it to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It does not matter. And that's the circumstance that they're in. And it's very unfortunate because they were starting so well, but unfortunately it looks like they are bound to have another miserable season, not because of the complications we knew they had with their roster, not because of the defense allowing 45 points a game, it feels like, not because of, Joe Burrow playing poorly, because he didn't play well in week 1 against the Browns. I think they only had 95 passing yards or something like that. Not because of that, but because your quarterback couldn't be protected in the first place. And like I said, larger scheme, maybe he is just injury prone. It's kind of ironic because Lamar Jackson, who was greatly disrespected by the Baltimore Ravens, and they didn't pay him because they felt like he was injury prone. Remember, Lamar Jackson comes in 2018, takes over midseason for Joe Flacco, plays really well, not perfectly, but pretty well. 2019, he's the MVP, one of the best single season performances you'll ever see by a quarterback, rushes for over 1,200 yards, gets 36 touchdowns, and wins the MVP. Does play a really bad playoff game, but he did that. He won the MVP. 2020 comes back, not as many dazzling numbers from him personally, but they go into Tennessee and they win a playoff game on the road. Lamar Jackson did that. 3 seasons in, first-round draft pick, then right there was the perfect time to pay him. That's exactly when you should pay him. It's before he had 2 seasons where he was out with an injury issue. Obviously, that's hindsight. You can't predict that, but that was the perfect time to pay him, and they didn't do it. They waited. They stalled. They picked up his 5th-year option, and they didn't pay him. Let's not forget, at the time, Russell Wilson was the highest paid player in the NFL. He signed a contract for about $35 million a year. I guarantee you, if you presented Lamar Jackson after the season ended with a $36, $37, $38 million a year contract, he would have taken it and signed it right then and there. But then we know what happened. Patrick Mahomes obliterated the market. He went from 35 to 45, and not over 4 years like most quarterbacks do. Not even 5 years, like most quarterbacks do now. They did 4 years before. 10 years, $450 million. So then, after Patrick Mahomes signed, your price point went from maybe 36 would be okay to 46 would be okay. See, this is what you got to deal with when you wait to pay quarterbacks, and the Ravens made a huge mistake there. Regardless, the issue that we always felt like with Lamar was that he was injury prone. And after the Ravens didn't pay him that first instance, which they should have, they waited for 2021 when he missed the last 5 games of the season due to injury, and 2022 when he missed the last 5 games of the season due to injury. And both of those seasons, especially the last one, I feel like Lamar Jackson could have played. He really could have played. But he chose not to because the Ravens weren't respecting him. They weren't respecting him at all by not giving him a contract when he asked for it. He was even holding signs up in Tampa after a game which said, pay him now, because he deserves to be compensated for all the work that he's done for the franchise. And unfortunately, he wasn't. And it's weird that the conversation around Lamar was that he was injury prone, so they didn't give him a contract. They made him wait. Eventually, he did get his money. 5 years, $260 million, became the highest paid quarterback in NFL history for the time being, just after Jalen Hurts signed his contract in summer 2023. But with Joe Burrow, first time of asking, the moment that he was eligible, even after he had already missed the whole season because he was injured, the Bengals paid him 5 years, $275 million. They didn't, remember, after Lamar, Justin Herbert signed 5 years, 262.5. They didn't go 5 years, 265. They didn't just barely try to reset the market. They said, we're going to fully reset the market. We're not going to go from 52.5 to 53. We're going to go to 55. That's how much we respect and value our guy, and it says a lot. There's a reason why the Chiefs didn't go 36, 37, 38. They went 45 because they respect this guy, and they should because of how great Joe Burrow has been so far in his young career. And it's just unfortunate that he may have his career cut short because of injuries, which maybe some of it has to do with genetics and the type of player that he is. We see many great athletes across various sports who are just injury prone. There's nothing you could do about that. Although many of the injury prone athletes, I would say a lot of it has to do with themselves, their diet, their nutrition, their training habits, etc. For Joe Burrow, it may simply be because his offensive line isn't protecting him well enough. And the people in the front office haven't done enough to enforce that. And it clearly shows by their quarterback being injured again by having turf toe. Hopefully this doesn't completely derail the Cincinnati Bengals season. But unfortunately, they're going to have to play at least most of it, at least 12 weeks of it, without their superstar quarterback in Joe Burrow. And let's see if Jamar Chase and Jake Browning and T. Higgins are able to hold up. Let's see if that offensive line is able to hold up. And let's see if that defense, who is just Trey Hendrickson and a bunch of practice squad players, is able to hold up, because it doesn't look too promising, even though they're already 2-0 so far.